Do you want to build a snowman?
Yes! But I can't.
Hey, welcome back ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Harry, and Deadpool and Wolverine is so much fun, but is it actually good? Like, I love the movie so much, but I also think it highlights some flaws with the MCU that I'm going to talk about later on, after I gush about everything I loved about this movie. And in a little bit, I'll also be joined by our own Colton Ogburn and Matt Singer to get their takes, but first, let's celebrate this film for a while, shall we? Now, I think this is a hard film to review because at what level do you evaluate it? Is it a Deadpool movie? Is it a piece of the Multiverse saga? Is it a capstone to the Fox XMen universe? Is it a celebration of Marvel? Or can we just watch it simply as a movie with relatable characters and a plot that we can engage with? I actually think it succeeds on every level except that last one, but if your bedrock foundation for a movie is this, did you have fun, then yes, I had fun. I mean, are you kidding me? This movie was fan service after fan service, and Deadpool even looks at the camera and says, "You're welcome for providing said fan service." The Deadpool movies have always been these little miracles stuffed between a lot of superhero films that take themselves really seriously, especially the X-Men movies. I mean, those films are dealing with weighty themes of bigotry and civil rights, so they've always been, at their core, telling tragic stories. But Deadpool 1 and 2 were able to parody this subgenre without undermining the emotional stakes of the story. In 1 and 2, I mean, those movies are at their core about Wade and Vanessa. Even though Wade always looks at the camera and undermines the action of individual scenes, we know that his heart is with his one true love. In Deadpool 2, the scenes where he talks to Vanessa in the afterlife are heartbreaking, and they show what was really at stake for him. Vanessa is his reason for living. But those movies, and this one, are also very cathartic for fans. Deadpool is a stand-in for the audience. Like when he said this,
McAvoy or Stewart? These timelines are so confusing.
he had me. And in this movie, they're not afraid to make fun of Marvel's problems. He directly says the multiverse doesn't work, that the MCU is in decline, and Wesley Snipes even gets to rub it in that the new Blade reboot is having problems getting off the ground. It's like Deadpool is an independent candidate for office. We feel like we can trust him because he's relishing in Disney's mistakes while also shilling for Disney. That's endearing and a lot of fun. And it was awesome having Hugh Jackman back as Wolverine. So I thought the way they handled the return was done very well. The movie knows that not everybody watching this film saw Loki or even knows what the heck a multiverse is. So instead of explaining the multiverse through exposition or narration, they show us the multiverse. The sequence where Deadpool meets Wolverine variants is a perfect example of how to show and not tell. And this sort of sequence delivers on what makes the multiverse a fun concept for these creators. This is when the multiverse saga is at its best. I think it's at its worst when we show like Jonathan Majors sulking while watching CGI timelines fade from existence. But then again, I'm a guy who does this for a living, and I've been devouring multiverse crossovers in the comics since my childhood. I am curious if your average casual Deadpool fan was able to enjoy all of this. We did have a lot of fun making parody merch for this movie though, which you can find for sale at our merch store, ScreenCrushMerch.com. We have this awesome There's No Living with the Killing shirt, a tribute to this.
There's no living with the killing.
We have Best Bubs showing Wolverine and Deadpool as Bert and Ernie. The Remember It shirt to celebrate Gambit's sacrifice in X-Men 97. LFG, Wilson and Howlett, this parody of Nighthawk starring X-Men characters. And this really fun new shirt we designed that depicts an RPG where Reed Richards faces a choice. Kill Wanda or tell Wanda all of your friends' weaknesses. And we also have We Can Do This All Day and Ross 24. Guys, we love designing these shirts for you, and shopping our merch store really is the best way for you to directly support our channel. Thank you guys so much for supporting us. Those links are below. Now, I also thought they did a good job honoring the legacy of Logan. They're able to hold the movie up with reverence, but we can also laugh at Deadpool desecrating his grave.
Wait, was that the actual grave from Logan or like a multiverse grave?
Well, I think that highlights the problem with multiverse stories in general. It could have been the Logan grave or one of the other infinite number of universes where this probably happened. See, in the multiverse, everything matters, so in effect, nothing matters. I also thought that Hugh Jackman did a great job of portraying this Wolverine as a different person. Maybe it's because he's older, but I really did feel like this was a different guy than the Wolverine we've known for 24 years. And for fans, getting to see Wolverine fight alongside Gambit, Elektra, Blade, against like all the Last Stand rejects, it was just so much damn fun. It's like they said we have to do everything we weren't allowed to do before, including the comic-accurate Wolverine mask. Now, I will say that the fight scenes were not as inspired as past Deadpool films. When you're dealing with two invincible guys, they just poke holes in each other and there are no stakes. It's more like watching two Looney Tunes characters fight. Now, the Honda Odyssey fight was really fun and inventive, where they were able to use the seatbelt and different objects within the car. I loved the Deadpool melee so much. It's another one of those computer-enhanced, single-take fight scenes that just give us so much to watch with little gags hidden everywhere.
Yeah, but Wasn't that fight kind of pointless?
It sure was. And in our Easter egg video, I compared it to the Brian landing in the spaceship from Life of Brian, which then gave us the space fight sequence that was only there so Brian could survive the fall from the top of a tower. And I don't care that this was unnecessary and not a character-driven fight, because it was amazing. I have loved superhero movies for so long that this film felt like a love letter written directly to me. It was fun. Now, the movie had some serious flaws that I'm going to talk about later, but first, I want to hear from our very own Colton Ogburn and ScreenCrush Editor-in-Chief Matt Singer. Colton, remember, is the guy who's trapped eternally into television but doesn't know it, so please don't tell him. Now, guys, before we get into things maybe you didn't like about the movie, you know, we're all Marvel fans here. Matt, I know you and I grew up reading the comics, so I want to get your opinions, like, you know, what you liked about this and, you know, where you thought it worked as a film and as like a piece of Marvel entertainment. Colton, what about you? What were your like positive thoughts on the film?
Oh, I absolutely adored it, man. This movie was everything I hoped it would be and more. If you had told me just a few years ago, even with as wild as the Deadpool films get in terms of references and cameos and things like that, I never would have believed that we would actually be seeing something like this. That this movie, but my wife told me that there were several times where I just kind of started to come up out of my chair a little bit, like I was just so surprised.
Yeah.
It was phenomenal, man, and I am just so excited for the future of Marvel, which is, you know, something that has kind of been up in the air for a little bit. I think it was just absolutely brilliant that they allowed Deadpool to be Deadpool. They didn't neuter this movie in any way. It's a full-blown Deadpool movie. It's very much a comic book movie. I said in my review, like when you go to a screening and you fill out your little you know comment on the film, I said this is one of the greatest comic book movies ever made. We can talk here in a second about, you know, the difference between it being like a great film, but and then the difference of it being a great, you know, fan service type film and the differences between that. But I think as a comic book fan, as a MCU fan, a Marvel movie fan, me personally, and I know you guys even longer, being a fan of Marvel predating even the MCU, that this film was a swan song for that era of Marvel films that predated even the MCU. And I'm just so excited for what they have coming next.
Well, Matt, you know, I want to in a second get to like what's coming next and how we think this like sets up Marvel's future. But Matt, you know, you're a loyal Marvel Unlimited subscriber. You're somebody who's well versed in comics, and you know, you're a movie critic. So, what did this movie like? What did you like about this movie in terms of being like a Marvel movie, a Deadpool movie? Like, what really hit for you?
I think the stuff that works in the movie is what's up in the title, is Deadpool and Wolverine. Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman, they know their characters. I think they actually play off each other really well. Like, you know, you sort of get, in that regard, you get what you are hoping for out of the movie. They fight maybe too much, since they can just endlessly stab each other and with no
like Looney
consequences.
Tunes characters. Yeah,
a little might go a long way in that regard. There's multiple scenes where they just beat the hell out of each other to no apparent effect. And I really will say I wanted to give credit to Hugh Jackman, because you watch this movie and he is so invested and engaged, and he has scenes with monologues where he's getting teared up. He's so emotional. And this movie is so silly, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse, but he is investing in it like he is in a Shakespearean tragedy. And
it really does.
And I respected that. And it reminded me of going to see those old X-Men movies. In a way, it is a fitting tribute to the Fox X-Men movies in that way. Those movies could often be very silly and ridiculous, and people would be wearing outrageously bad costumes. And sometimes the effects weren't great. But at their core, you always had Hugh Jackman in those movies acting his guts out, taking the character from the comics of Wolverine, who is always such an amazing and tragic and fascinating character, and investing him in the movies with the same level of pathos and emotion and rage and dry comedy. Like, he really always was the perfect Wolverine. And he is again in this movie. And I thought that was what I enjoyed most. And there are, sure, some of the cameos and surprises I did think were funny and clever and surprising. But the things that I liked most about it was just, you know, Ryan Reynolds being a motor mouth, Hugh Jackman being kind of disgusted and annoyed with him, because as funny as Ryan Reynolds can be as Deadpool, I sometimes feel the way Hugh Jackman and Wolverine does in this movie. And so I think putting a character in that position to be on screen being like, shut the hell up, actually almost makes him funnier in a way, because you have that voice of some parts of the audience right there in the movie.
And you're right. I think a lot of Ryan Reynolds' humor and Deadpool's humor, it is geared toward 15-year-old boys. And hey, nothing wrong with that, because these movies weren't around when I was 15, but if they were, they would have been my favorite movies of all time. So Matt, to that point, right? So you're someone who has been seeing comic book movies longer, much longer than you've been a movie critic, and maybe even longer than you've been thinking about movies analytically. Did you have, say, warm, fuzzy memories of Blade, of the first X-Men, second X-Men? Like, did this movie did it get you in any of your nostalgias? Did your inner geek really rejoice at seeing Channing Tatum's Gambit, who I can't think about without laughing because of the accent they put him in? What were your thoughts on that, just as a longtime fan? Where did it get you?
Well, it's kind of a double-edged adamantium sword, I guess you could say. Yes, it is sort of fun to see some of these characters back, right? To see Sabretooth and have them making fun of his eyebrows, or Toad, and to see some of these characters back. Sure, it's kind of fun. Blade, you mentioned Blade, that I was completely flabbergasted by, I will admit. And that was fun. And Wesley Snipes looked like he was happy to be there and enjoying himself, which that sort of energy can be infectious. The double-edged part of it is, I would say, is one of the ways that this movie sort of perplexed me, is that it is supposed to be, or it feels like it's supposed to be, this tribute to the Fox universe, and maybe more specifically, most of the time, the Fox X-Men universe. And yet they didn't bring in any of like the X-Men. Yes, you have Hugh Jackman, but name any other important X-Men character from those movies, and they are not in this. And so to me, there is sort of a weird absence in this movie where it's like Fox, Fox, Fox. There's so many jokes about Fox. They have this surprisingly kind of touching tribute to those movies over the closing credits. But none of those characters are in it. And I've thought about this a lot, and I think there's pluses and minuses to it. I think maybe one of the reasons they didn't do it, besides the logistics of it, is they put a Wolverine in this movie whose whole arc is, I'm the last X-Man, I'm the only X-Man left.
Good
and
point.
So if you put the X-Men in it, it could potentially weaken that arc. On the flip side, I feel like if you take that character that I just described and let him talk to Professor X or Cyclops or Jean Grey one more time, that could be a really affecting and interesting scene. And we don't get anything like that in this movie. So yes, again, I'm certainly more mixed here, I think, on the movie overall. It is fun seeing some of these characters back. Kind of the more surprising and random, the better in some ways, because it's such a what the heck kind of thing. But I feel like you only get that reaction once. And maybe over the long term, it might have been a more interesting movie if we had gotten some of those bigger characters to come back, even for a scene or two or whatever. And I did sit there going, are we going to get any of the X-Men in this Fox X-Men tribute? And the answer basically is no, we didn't.
My guess would be, and I don't want to get into theories in this video, we got a whole other week next week to deal with that. My guess is that at San Diego Comic-Con, they're going to announce Avengers versus X-Men, and they were saving it for that. And this was like just a soft way to bring them in. But again, who knows what they're going to do? I've not read a single rumor yet. So Colton, you're obviously super excited, like, about all the Marvel stuff and this and that. Same question I asked Matt. Like, what really, what got you rising out of your seat like this when you were watching the movie? What really hit for you?
Well, I kind of want to piggyback off of what Matt said. I do agree that there was a certain feeling of, yes, I personally was very excited to see Elektra, Blade, Gambit.
Elektra?
Yeah.
Wow, you're the only person who is excited to see Elektra.
Besides Jennifer Garner's accountant. But yes.
But I got to say, I love the Ben Affleck dig.
That was great.
I love it.
Great.
Good joke. That is a very good joke.
All the showbiz jokes, like Hugh Jackman's divorce, things like that, they worked out great.
Oh,
sorry,
I
stepped on you.
No, I loved all that. But to Matt's point, I agree that really, who cares? Like, I get that feeling. Who cares that Elektra's there? It would have been
Right.
cooler, I think, to see maybe a Halle Berry Storm, see Rogue come in, maybe a James McAvoy Professor X. I loved his chemistry with Jackman in Days of Future Past. So yes, I can see that argument, and I would have liked that. But I think Matt, made his own, counterpoint to that, which I agree with, is that may have kind of pulled away from what they were trying to do. Dude, for the longest time, anytime I've been asked who's your favorite superhero, I have a very specific answer since I, was a kid. Hugh Jackman's Wolverine. That's my favorite rendition
That
of
particular
any
version.
super.
Yeah.
Yes, that particular version. And in this movie, yes, Deadpool movies are hilarious. They're raunchy. They're off the wall. But Ryan, you made a good point earlier when we were talking. They have heart. And in this movie, and Deadpool's usually the one to bring the heart. In this movie, Hugh Jackman brought the heart. And you got Matt, you already spoke to this, but he gave a phenomenal performance. That there were several points in this movie where you could see the tears in his eyes. And I'm not to get melodramatic. I'm honestly kind of getting chill bumps on my arms thinking about just the performance he gave. You could see the emotion in his eyes. And as a Fox era X-Men fan, and having recently rewatched the films, you could feel, even though this is a different Wolverine, you could feel just the emotional impact. Like I've said before, this was not Deadpool 3. This was a Deadpool and Wolverine movie. This was just as much a sequel, I think, to Logan as it was a Deadpool movie. This was a continuation of these characters. And so Hugh Jackman, to answer your question, that was my favorite part of this movie, seeing him back. I love that he came back.
Did you like, was the mask like icing on the top for you? Or did you think like, do we really need the mask? Because he already emotes so well as Wolverine. What did you think about that reveal?
Little things like that, like the mask and the cameos and all that. That's just the sprinkles on top. So yes, seeing the mask was awesome. I love that jump when they jump out of the back of the bus, him and Deadpool. Oh my God. I loved how they had his Wolverine's eyes in the mask move like Deadpool's do, that they're animated.
Yeah. And they're kind of, it's interesting to see this evolution where SpiderMan, the mask never moved. Civil War, the mask could move because it was electronic. And now I wonder if, with Peter in a cloth suit, if they're just going to be like, just make the damn eyes move. It's fine. If they're just going to like slowly work us more and more into like a comic booky cartoon kind of universe that's less gritty and grounded in realism. Now, Matt brought up a good point, Colton. He said that those cameos happen, they work once. You're not going to get the same thrill again. You're somebody who has looked back on Spider-Man No Way Home. You did a video about how you liked it, but you thought it was a little overrated. And I think that a lot, like when you watch No Way Home, when Andrew Garfield's revealed, there's a literal applause break built into the movie, which is very strange. You can even, I've seen cuts of it where they just take out the sound except for, and it's weird. I am wondering how the movie, once that wears off, how it's going to stand alone as a movie. Are we just going to fast forward to certain scenes, like maybe we do with some other Marvel movies? So that kind of brings me to a little bit later. I'll give you guys my thoughts, and I want to hear how you guys think this is going to heal the MCU or not. But Matt, what was it about the movie that didn't quite hit for you?
Well, I had a reasonably good time sitting in the theater. Again, I enjoyed the leads. Some of the cameos that we've talked about, I thought were very fun and clever. And there are some jokes I laughed out loud a bunch of times. But I also felt at times like this is barely a movie. It feels so focused on just cameos, Easter eggs, inside jokes that all seemed very much, maybe other than Deadpool and Wolverine together and their relationship, everything else about the movie felt like an afterthought. All of the stuff with the TVA, all of the stuff with anchor beings, all of the stuff with how all of these things work didn't make any sense to me. And the more I think about them, the less sense they make to me. And so it's the kind of movie where you're sitting there and you're entertained, you're laughing, you're having a decent time. And then afterwards you're like, wait, so how does any of this work? And how did Deadpool wind up in Earth 616 before he went to the TVA? And why did he go there? And what does he care about the Avengers? And how does he know who the Avengers even are? And
what's this have to do with him and Vanessa breaking up? I mean, I'll go into this later, but I had a lot of the same questions.
Exactly. So it's the kind of thing where, like, look, was I bored in the movie theater? Absolutely not. Did I laugh? Absolutely. Did I enjoy some of the cameos? Yes. Did I like the leads? Yes. As I sit here after the fact and like look at go through my notes in my head of like what exactly happened in this movie, the more I go, it's like it's a road trip movie where they go literally nowhere and do almost nothing. Like by definition,
nowhere.
It's like they're literally in a void. Like they go to a void, and the whole movie is in a void. And I think that the more you look at the plot, the less sense it makes on any level except a meta level. Like the whole movie is created in a meta sense. All of this stuff about Wolverine being the anchor being and the Fox X-Men universe not being able to exist without him. When you think about that as a thing, it's ludicrous. But when you think about that as well, like Hugh Jackman really was the star of those movies and they kind of don't make sense without him. It works on that level in your mind. Like on a plot mechanics level, you're like, you could just sit and try to piece it together for an hour. But if you just say, well, you got to look at it you almost have to be Deadpool to make sense of this movie and to be able to exist within the narrative and above the narrative, sort of talking about it, joking about it, and understanding the references all at once. That's kind of the only way it makes any sense. So,
go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, to me, that's when you talk about like, what are the things that didn't work? It's all of that. It's that this, again, I do wonder when you try to watch this movie a second or a third time, how much it is going to hold up. Pretty much everything except for that core central dynamic between the two leads.
Colton, how about you? Are you a no notes Disney shill kind of guy when it comes to this, or was there anything in the movie you don't think quite clicked and worked?
Oh yeah, I get my monthly check from Disney.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, they own the store. Yeah.
Look, I think to quote our vice president, it depends on the context in which you're looking at it. This movie, yes, it's very meta, but we have to keep in mind that's what Deadpool is. Deadpool's a meta character. Yes, this movie is very fan servicey. It's very event film. It's an event film, just like No Way Home. Yes, I have those criticisms of No Way Home that there was the excitement for it, but does it hold up? I don't know if this movie will hold up. I tend to think it will because it's just such a fun time, and it's a sequel in many ways, to those Deadpool movies, to those X-Men movies. I think it will always have a place in every fan's heart. To get to Matt's point about the TVA and like the anchor beings and stuff, I kind of appreciated that they didn't get too bogged down in like the minutia of how all that works. I love how they kind of just presented it, because you really have two options. You can either just say this is what's happening and go with it and move along, or you can spend a lot of time trying to hammer into the viewer, okay, here's exactly what's happening. And I'm glad that for this movie they kind of went the other route and just kind of put it out there and went. I think with a Deadpool movie, and I've always wondered how they would incorporate not only his fourth wall breaking, but his references to Marvel Studios and Kevin Feige and all of that. I've wondered how they would incorporate that into the MCU. So getting to see him break the fourth wall with Happy Hogan, getting to see him break the fourth wall with Wolverine and say, Fox killed him, but Disney brought him back. They're going to make him do this till he's 90. And Wolverine just kind of like half a second glances at him and then goes right back. I love how
it's handled in the comics. People will kind of hear him, but they think Deadpool's just insane, so he talks to himself. Yeah. So you bring up a good point, though, and that is the MCU. So this movie, like I was saying earlier, it's hard to know how to judge it because it had to do a lot of things. It had to bring back Hugh Jackman. It had to be a Deadpool movie, but it also had to kind of heal the MCU. Like the joke is, I'm Marvel Jesus, but no, I mean, he's Marvel Jesus. He's the biggest character they have the rights to right now that they can just put into a movie. This movie was supposed to acknowledge and correct some of these mistakes that Marvel's been making. Now, it can't correct, if Agatha and Ironheart aren't good, those are already in the can, and all these other things they've already put into motion. But Matt, do you think this movie is going to point us and point the MCU in the correct direction for fans, or are fans going to start coming back after this?
I don't know. I'm going to turn it back on you, Ryan. Like, what did this movie heal or fix? Like, that doesn't seem like what this movie is about at all to me. I didn't get the sense that anything was different really at the end. The end of the movie is we have basically changed nothing except we brought Wolverine back to life, essentially.
That alone. I mean, I think that alone and saying like they did a few things. One, just having Deadpool as a fan proxy, say in a Marvel movie, we're kind of at a low point and the multiverse stuff isn't working. I think that goes a long way for fans. I felt a similar way, like I mentioned this earlier, when I saw the first Deadpool and he said these timelines are so confusing. So I think that's one. The other thing is what you just said. They've brought Wolverine in and they've implied that Deadpool is going to serve a larger purpose. So it's a way of telling fans, to my mind, look, maybe the Marvels didn't resonate with you. Maybe you didn't like Thor 4, but we have all these other characters that we're going to pull out of our catalog and that are going to bring to the forefront. They even tease like the Wolverine Hulk fight, you know? So I wonder if that's going to be enough.
To me, some of the things that this movie does are just as bad or worse than some of the issues that Marvel has had lately, which is all the stuff with the multiverse. If you don't like the multiverse or you find that confusing, I mean, other than the fact that you have Ryan Reynolds breaking the fourth wall and giving you permission not to care about it, like, this is the most multiversal movie that's ever been. You know, like, there's so many jokes and references. And one of the weird things about this movie was, you know, they set up this ending where they're going to make this noble sacrifice. And you think, well, it doesn't matter because there's infinite versions of Deadpool and Wolverine out there, and they'll just use other ones if they want to. And then they don't even die. It's like they don't even use the get out of jail free card that they have given themselves. They're like, no, they're fine. And in fact, that's the part where Hugh Jackman is at his like most shirtlessly ripped, which is like almost comical in and of itself. You know, you asked Colton about like, well, what did you think of Wolverine putting on the mask? And I thought it was absolutely hilarious. Maybe the funniest joke in the whole movie is that they don't save the mask for the final thing. The final reveal is Hugh Jackman's abs. Like, that's the big moment that they save for the end, is like Hugh Jackman oiled up and absolutely shredded, which I got a huge chuckle out of when he's walking
because
around
they even teased that he had let himself go too. You know, that played out really well. Yeah,
exactly.
Colton,
Ryan,
same question to you. Do you think that we've healed the multiverse saga here?
Well, I'm going to push back on a few things. As far as like the multiverse goes in terms of characters dying and stuff, I would have felt, I think, a certain, you know, bit of sadness if that specific Deadpool died, if that specific Wolverine died. I mean, I totally get the point of what Matt is saying, but I think the multiverse has done an okay job at saying that, yes, there are infinite versions, but I think they've done a good job at making clear, but they're still different. They're different people. They have their own experiences, their own lives. And also just to the point of the multiverse in itself not working, I don't really understand that, because really, I think the concept of the multiverse is getting dragged down by the fact that Marvel just hasn't been putting out their best work. I mean, take Secret Invasion, for example. That's probably the worst thing they've done since Endgame. That has nothing to do with the multiverse. I personally liked She-Hulk, but I know a lot of fans didn't. Nothing to do with the multiverse. I don't think the multiverse in itself is the issue. I mean, take Loki. That's as multiverse as it gets. And I think, you know, speaking for myself, and I think many people, that was received very well. Yeah, it gets a little confusing.
Sure. Marvel doesn't have a multiverse problem. They have a mid problem, which we know.
Yes.
So do you think that Deadpool and Wolverine did a good job of kind of bringing some of telling fans, hey, it's going to be okay? Was it like too fan servicey enough? What were your thoughts on that?
I think that it did. It was a good movie. A win is a win. I think that if they can keep putting out quality content, then yes, this will be a feather in their cap to let fans know, hey, I haven't enjoyed the last few Marvel things, but I really enjoyed that Deadpool thing. So I'll go see the next one. So their next job is to make sure that the next movie they put out is good. And then the next one they put out is good. And that's how I don't think this movie alone has saved Marvel. No, but it's certainly a step in the right direction.
I would just worry, you know, one of the other things I hear from people is that, you know, like that. And when I say like the multiverse, I guess I also just in some ways mean like just the amount of characters that you have to know, the sort of the way that they've kind of moved away from some of the bigger names and the more mainstream characters, and it has gotten a little diluted and diffuse. And yes, this movie is anchored by two of their biggest stars and very famous characters. But on the other hand, this is not a movie that, I mean, could someone who is, let's imagine a hypothetical person who doesn't exist, who has not seen all of these movies or has maybe even seen almost none of them and wants to go see this. Maybe they have only seen Avengers or something and they want to go see this. There's a lot of stuff in this movie that's going to go way over their heads. I saw this. I paid to see this movie on a 3:15 on a Thursday at a multiplex, and there were big laughs for some of the jokes. There were also some jokes that were clearly that Marvel thought were huge moments that got zero response. You mentioned him, I think, Ryan, earlier. When Channing Tatum walks out as Gambit, in this audience, you could have heard a pin drop. They had no response. They had no reaction. I'm sure some of them knew who Channing Tatum was. I'm sure a lot of them knew that he's Gambit, especially when he starts talking like that. But, you know, like clearly not everyone in that room is obsessively reading websites to know that, oh, he was supposed to be Gambit and they didn't make it. Like, this is actually kind of a joke that might go over some people's heads. And there's a lot of examples of it. Like, so do I think this movie is going to be a hit? Absolutely. Do I think it's crowd pleasing? Yes, but I do think the amount that crowd is going to be pleased really still depends on how obsessed they are with Marvel. And if you are a more casual fan, I don't think you're going to get as much out of this. And so if the thing Marvel needs to do is kind of broaden their audience back a little bit again. Yes, I think some of those people are going to come to see the movie, whether they love it as much as we or other hardcore fans will. That I'm a little skeptical about.
Well, we'll have to see. And like I said, I didn't think it was a perfect movie, and I've got some drawbacks I want to talk to you guys about. Again, Matt Singer, Colton Ogburn, you can find their social links below, and on, you can see Matt's pieces about Deadpool and Wolverine on the website, including his ranking of every Fox X-Men movie. It's a great read. I highly recommend it. And you can see Colton here on the channel all the time. Twitters are below. So one problem with this movie is that it introduces the idea that death no longer matters in any of these stories. Any actor can always come back to play a variant of themselves. I really don't mind that too much because after all, I'm a comic book fan and no one ever stays dead in the comics except Uncle Ben. My biggest problem with this movie is that it did not establish its emotional stakes very well.
What do you mean?
Well, like I said earlier, the first two Deadpool movies establish clear stakes. In the first movie, he wants to be with Vanessa, and in the second movie, he's trying to prove that he could start a family with Vanessa, while he's also grieving her. But in this movie, stakes are very muddled. Like, we start off with him wanting to join the Avengers, but why? Nothing in the last couple movies made us think that he would want to join a superhero team in a different universe. In fact, he ended Deadpool 2 in a pretty great place. Now, in a meta way, Wade's motivation makes sense because we know that Wade is actually trying to join the MCU because Disney bought Fox. But like within the movie, his motivations make no sense. I also think it was a mistake to show a subjective point of view of his breakup with Vanessa halfway through the movie. The whole point of their conversation is that Wade is feeling listless and he doesn't care enough, but we're being told that instead of being shown that throughout the movie. And the two of them being broken up off screen was like a huge curveball that undermined the first two films. It would have been much more effective for them to have that fight, say, at the birthday party, or for something to go wrong at the party that necessitated for Wade to wish to join the MCU. Or maybe when the TVA says his universe is going to be destroyed, he returns to his universe and then watches it get spaghettified like we saw happen to universes in Loki Season 2. See, in the Multiverse saga, we keep getting told that universes end, and we see lines on a screen being erased. But who cares? Now, look, when we actually see characters we care about getting wiped out, like, we feel it. But I think this movie needed that. We needed more tangible stakes that are established earlier in the movie. But that is not the kind of movie this is. This is a movie to get us into theaters and to cheer when our heroes come to life. And that's not a bad thing. I just wish that, like the first two Deadpool movies, this film was just a little bit more than that. But that's just my thoughts, guys. Let me know what you thought of Deadpool and Wolverine down in the comments or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, welcome to the channel and please subscribe and smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.